Good afternoon. I'm here with my guest, poet Michael Todd Steffen. Hello, Michael.
Hi, Doug.
So glad that you can be here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Michael has a new book out from the Savannah Barbara Press. It's a Partner Orchard and Day Moon. And Savannah Barbara Press is a local press, but has published many authors internationally and is a very well-respected small press, so that's a good feather to have in your cap.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, I'm going to read a blurb to this book by David Ferry. He's a very prominent translator and poet. And so here it goes. I've just come back from reading the poems in Partner Orchard Day Moon, full of admiration. Steffen is so alive in his writing, keen with observation, both of what things actually look like and what the wind feels like, how things grow and rot, and how things grow and rot, and also of character, his own, his uncle's, anybody he sees. The book gives us many wonderful, memorable lines using his chosen meter for all it's worth. This is a very good work. I was going to ask you, Mike, you had a severe case of wanderlust for many years, France, all over the United States. Mm-hmm. But you made Boston your home. Could you just give us a little talk about your journey?
Well, I went to England first to do a master's degree, actually, on a Rotary International Fellowship, where I was a Renaissance scholar, French Renaissance, and I had an opportunity to go to France to teach for 1 year, which I thought would be good. I put a lot of time into studying French, and I loved the French culture. I'd studied one summer in Paris, and so I took the opportunity to go a year, and teaching opportunities just coming up year to year that allowed me to stay there, all in all about 10 years. And when I got to the end of my tether on what I was doing in France, or maybe my interest in being there any longer, I came back to America. I've lived for a while in the city where my parents lived, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for a while, and then I moved out to Boston. I decided to stay here, so that's been my journey. Traveling. Looking around wasn't so much done purposefully. There was always something that was leading me to the next place. So.
And you lived a sort of hand-to-mouth existence for a while, just working on your writing and living a very sort of austere existence, shall we say?
I don't know.
This was a purposeful.
I don't know if it was austere.
When you were traveling in the United States and Pittsburgh and things like that.
Yeah, when I came back to America, there was a time that the flow of money came to a trickle or ran out, and a time I would say that I considered maybe in a way that Emily Dickinson would, that the world was my house.
The world was your house.
Except when it rained, it wasn't.
Right. That's a good way of putting it.
But there was a great spiritual freedom in unbinding the economical chains, the daily things for a time. It's not a lifestyle that I would choose for a permanent. But at a time when I was trying to sink my roots back into the American imagination, I think it was very necessary for me to be free of the constricting things, to have time to think, to talk with people, to look at things, to smell, to hear, to listen to what America was, because it was
sounding a little like Walt Whitman there,
Well, it's. It was a time of senses, of re-engaging yourself at a very primal level, from park benches, city sidewalks, riversides, talking with folks who were a little down on their luck at the time, and you get back to the clay of what a nation is. I think that was very important for me,
Okay, well, that's interesting. Okay. So in our conversations over the years, and we've had many, bagel bars and other venues, you've talked about contemporary poets reaching for the sensational versus the substantial. And maybe you could just touch on this a bit. I mean, not all, but you're saying it was a disturbing trend that you found.
Well, I don't know if it's disturbing. I was reading something by another contemporary poet today. He had been asked what is lacking in contemporary poetry. Mm-hmm. And I think the way he answered it was very good. He chose to answer first what is offered in contemporary poetry, and I have to agree. There's a lot of wit, colloquial fluency today. The poets are also interesting, and the topical register is almost endless. Mm-hmm. People write about such things, and I'm always amazed by what I see in contemporary poetry. But one thing that Alfred Korn said was that it lacks thought or substance. And I think it's a culture that maybe because we're very mediatized, I don't know, maybe we halt from passion, from stronger emotions, and there is a mistrust in America generally. It goes way back to a long time ago, maybe as soon as Dickinson or earlier. There's a mistrust of thought, of ideas. William Carlos Williams famously said for American poets, invent in things, not ideas,
And I use that often in my creative writing classes because people don't use enough images rather than, they want to focus on abstract concepts with no images attached to them.
Absolutely. I think where a lot of young poets maybe, I know I did it when I was beginning, will lose their footing in writing is going to thoughts, to abstracts, trying to make great pronouncements in abstract terms. But you're right, you have to begin your writing with things. I mean, with sensations. Good writing, you learn very basically, is the
which is evidenced in your book.
Well, it's what David Ferry was saying. He was very generous with the comments. I look back and I don't know. I guess I wanted my writing when I came back from Europe. I had just finished translating a lot of French Renaissance poetry, paying a lot of attention to meter, rhyme, formal aspects of poetry. When I came back, for me to get generated in my own poetry, it took the basics. I had to remember what I'd been told by other writers, not just for poetry, but good writing was sensuous, not sensual, but sensuous. And
make the distinction for the layman out there.
Well, I was told sensuous is just engaging your senses, touch, taste, hearing, smell. Sensual, of course, is leaning toward eroticism, I guess.
Okay. And you always like to lean towards that.
The sensuous is not bad, but I think that's a different topic. Poetry is,
Now, the noted critic Dennis Daly, who we both know, described you as ghost haunted, and in fact, in one of your poems, Ghostman, it deals with such a figure. Would you say, in a sense, that most of men are ghost haunted, in a way?
I would have a hard time making any pronouncements about most of men.
Metaphorically speaking, we have a ghost.
I think the world is ghost haunted. We're very conscious. I think all of humanity is our mortality. Of course, with writers, artists, poets especially, it's a major contemplation. We're mortal. I don't know why. I was thinking of this very early in life, 7, 8 years old. It would sometimes worry me, the fact that I knew I was going to have to die one day. And then I would console myself with the thought that, it's going to be a long time from now. But I think mortality, in the deep contemplation of it, it was a big contemplation for Renaissance writers and Renaissance literature, of course, being what I did. the contemplation of death would bring you to the vanity of the world. You can only go so far, and if you break through to it, it's a consolation to know your human nature is to have to cross that boundary. And I don't know, creatively, I've used it as a displacement maybe mechanism for creativity. There was one poem in the book called Ghostman.
That's what I'm referring to. You know, so often, sometimes people mistake the poem as being autobiographical. I mean, did you actually see a Ghostman, or? Because the noted critic Dennis Daly, who grew up in Salem, in a historic home,
right,
a very reasonable, in a very responsible position, said yes, very matter-of-factly, he saw ghosts in his home as a child.
I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that at all.
So how about you as this guy?
I believe very much. No, what happened was it was displaced from with I'm more like Wordsworth. I feel the spirit world as intimations. I don't have any specific sorry about that. I can't bust a ghost. I can't mediate a ghost, but I do. I'm a strong believer in the other world, not only through religion, but through meditation, feeling, sensitivity, poetry, a lot of intimations. But I use it, and don't anyone throw tomatoes at me or anything, but as a fictional device. Shakespeare used it in Hamlet. A lot of poetry has meditated on death as a figure, as an artistic device.
As a prop, almost, right?
A prop, yeah. A prop, but for the imagination, especially for the imagination. Okay. And the poem, though, did stem from a couple of my school friends actually finding a man hanged in a park near our school, and it did have just a profound effect on us as kids. I remember I was sleeping in my parents' bedroom on the floor next to their bed for a good 2 weeks after this event, because it was a young man who did it, a young man that we knew, all of his kids knew, and he had some problems mentally, and he was into drugs, I guess, a little bit. In the long of it, he ended up hanging himself in a public park, was found by friends of mine. We shared the eyewitnesses, and yeah, I mean, that young, it did stun. It stunned us, and it scared us all,
Yeah.
As it should.
Yeah, the first experience with death.
Sure.
Is always something. Now, this is your first book, and you're 50 years old.
Yeah. Took my time.
Yeah, you took your time, and. Do you think because you're a seasoned writer, you avoided the many pitfalls that one can encounter with a first book?
Boy, I wouldn't know. I was not.
I mean, you were a young writer at one point.
Yeah.
Now you're a seasoned writer.
Right. It may have been a blessing that I had tried to get a publication of a poet from the French Renaissance that had translated a lot. I think if I went back to that translation, which I hope to one day, I'll be able to even make that translation a lot better. It's been a grace to avoid publishing, because I've been able to work on the poems, and they have been worked and reworked and reworked, and hopefully, all for the better. But poetry's that way. It is something that takes a long time to appreciate. When you read good poems, they will resonate for a long time with you, and they will come to mean more. And if I can bring that dimension to my poetry, if that's what this waiting period has been, so much the better. I'm in no hurry about it. The satisfaction of poetry to me is not how much I'm going to publish or how much recognition I'm going to get, but it's the making of something that will hold its meaning for me, something I may look at 5-10 years from now and say, because some of these poems were written maybe up to 20 years ago. And
they were revised.
Oh, yeah, they've been, the earth moves, it settles, it resettles, and they've been tweaked and revised, but I have things there that still mean a lot to me, that still speak to me, and I think in poetry, that is one of the things that you're working with, some sense of making something. Today, so much is factory made. And it used to be things were made. The objects that you got, a belt even, or things were made by hand, and they were made to last.
There may come a day when poems are made in factories, like fortune cookies.
Well, people are working on programs to produce language and poetry, stories even, I imagine.
But I think poetry is a very human thing, and I don't think that can be mass-produced. I hope not, anyway.
Let us hope not. It'll come out. Someone will make a program that's going to produce all these poems. I'm sure.
Good. Now, I particularly liked your poem Thanksgiving, and this is when your uncle shot a dinner goose, and you describe his hands as sensitive walnut hands, a beautiful description, and he tasted the salt of pain and gratitude. And you seem very sensitive to the yin and yang of things, the dichotomy that life sort of lays out to us. Perhaps you can comment on that.
Yeah, I think in the day, and I had to have been really small, there was a goose and a turkey always at Thanksgiving. And I had uncles who hunted, and there was
growing up in the suburbs of New York, this is like exotic to me, right?
Right. Yeah. And I've had other friends from New York who had never seen a cow or a pig. My grandfather had. But yeah, we grew up, and in those days, life was more rugged. It was more hard scrabble just for everybody. The guys were tougher. Or
men were men, women were women, right?
But yeah, I mean, there was this sense. My grandfather, for example, would kill a chicken that they would pluck and eat, but they were sensitive to these animals that they were with, and the hunters were sensitive to the animals, which is one of the points that I make in the duck poem. Because if it were flying, if it were healthy, and if it had a chance, it was game. That was fair game to shoot at. Well, we found a duck, like in the poem, who was entangled in fishing line and unable. It was just going whack, whack, whack on the side of the river, and it was unable to move. And once my uncles, all with their guns and the dogs around, had realized that the poor creature was helpless, down went their guns, and they got all very concerned about extricating it from the fishing line and making sure it got off free and everything. So this weird sense in humans that
the animal doesn't, animal just kills and eats, whatever, it kicks another animal just to see it, get hurt or put it down, but it just goes and eats, and that's its main thing. There's never any guilt.
But I think as a young man, even, I was sensitive to what would become my nature as a writer. I had that nature, unlike some of the other of my cousins. When the gun shot, it scared me. It rattled me. I have a flight reflex, not a fight. That's just me, and I was very different in many of these respects, and thank heavens I did. I found literature and poetry and art, things that engaged that nature where it became useful to me instead of a.
Well, Hemingway did both, right?
Well, I
did literature and the gun and hunting.
The whole thing, yeah.
So,
yeah.
But not for you.
Well, no. I've always disliked violence, but I've at the same time always been fascinated intellectually. It's part of what happens in front of us. And it's something you have to fight through if you reject it, to acknowledge that it's there. And it's part of accepting the world the way it is. There's plenty about life that is inconvenient and painful, and working on acceptance. I think that's a good deal of poetry is reaching out to touch.
It reminds me of this poem by Edgar Lee Masters where it's this really intense kiss, and it draws blood, and he has the taste of salt in his mouth. So it's that yin and yang I was talking about.
Yeah, pain and pleasure. Yeah. Like love and death.
Okay, well, I want to hear, proof is always in the pudding, so I want to hear you read from your work. And again, sure. This can be bought at Savannah Barber Press, or it's on Amazon.com. One day Mike might even have a website. We'll see. Okay.
I'm not real professional on the internet yet. But last night there was a blood moon. I went out at 3:45 to see it, but there were too many clouds here. One of the there are three elements in the title of the book: partner, orchard, day moon. And I'll read about the moon. The day moon just struck me one day as a phenomenon. Symbol of the nighttime, something that's very romantic, but often you'll catch a sight of it during the day, and there it is. So it became one element. This is called day moon. Endless whir, now in a sleepless window. Lover's path lamp, masked, inconspicuous now in the pale blue light of the day sky, in whose bee hum the mirror of the mind keeps full and thoughtless, for this oddity of boundaries crossed like spring and winter, that lonely orbit nearly consumed by its greater, farther, so partial reflection. So, and of course that reflection being the sun, which is the part of the moon that we actually see. One of the initial things coming back to America that was very different were the shopping spaces, the malls being so crowded and ample. And I happened to be very down-dressed in a mall one day, coming upon a display of plush autumn wear, and it made me feel suddenly terribly small and insignificant. And
What department store was it?
I don't remember. It was one in a mall, but I was in my summer wear, still confronting these dummies and very nice looking back to autumn, back to school wear. This is called Christmas in August. Wandering lost through the department stores, you catch a glimpse of yourself in an odd mirror gliding over the escalator's handrest. When the metal step slips forward and you stumble up, walking around the mannequins, clad for autumn in pullovers and cords. Summer hasn't ended. As one begins to fit a season, comfort stops to look ahead of what you're feeling. Just in jeans, t-shirt, and mile more loafers, you are struck dumb by the bland forms, plush apparel. Seeing school buses, foliage turning mauve, a break from the salad days. Small wonder marketing keeps shuffling our closets and our drawers, outstripping the wind's transparent robe, still being with the bag people, time on hand, indoors. And I think part of that evokes what I feel very strongly about poetry is you're in a situation where it brings a picture up, like the man seeing these clothes and then he has a strong sensation of autumn coming near, a premonition, a season ahead, and goes something to what I've always strongly believed. Horace said the poem is like a picture. And I think a poem, if it's good, engages the imagination, maybe unlike a physical picture, in that it's giving you prompts to see something for yourself by your own experience.
Sort of like the Red Wheelbarrow.
Like the Red Wheelbarrow, very much like.
By Carlos Williams, I believe.
Yeah. So, and that last one, still being with the bag people, I was just months before I would be with bag people in the sense of street people, but I was thinking of shoppers and how ironic it was that they were all carrying bags around.
Yeah, because when you think of bag people,
you think of a bag woman, maybe a poor woman who with bags. But I thought of that irony in the mall, watching all these people carrying their bags, of course, full of new stuff. But and it's never a criticism toward people who have or haven't. It's just noticing. It is a culture where we carry bags around a lot and sacks. Meriwether Lewis, an explorer from the Midwest, where I grew up in the Midwest, Nebraska, not far from the Missouri River. Meriwether Lewis has always loomed very largely in my mind.
When you say the Midwest, I mean, isn't it like the Midwest of Chicago very different from that of Nebraska in the sensibility? Nebraska, I almost feel is
Well,
it's kind of southwestern.
No, Nebraska's not southwestern. You have to get into Oklahoma before you're starting with the southwest, really. The plush Middle West, and in Nebraska properly, you're calling prairie land. It was Willa Cather's land, if you read O Pioneers. It was a lush prairie land where the Sioux Indians roamed. I became very fascinated growing up there by the archaeological history, the tallgrass prairies, the Sioux Indians, the sandhill cranes that migrate through Nebraska. It's a beautiful, beautiful land, even to this day, with a lot of the prairie gone.
You wouldn't know that from Nebraska, the movie that came out.
Not from Nebraska, the movie, but if you want to look at Dances with Wolves, though it wasn't filmed very much in Nebraska, it evokes that landscape. Maybe that landscape is closing down quite a bit, but it's what I grew up with in my heritage near Fort Kearney, not far away from Ogallala, which is famous for an Indian battle, a very sorrowful one. But this is called Meriwether Lewis.
Okay.
Imagining the great explorer in his epic journey across the prairie. Meriwether Lewis. His need, the unexplored, a land unscathed by European languages, thundered dauntingly, understandably, if equivocally, upon the ocean of the prairie, to boats narrowly welcome on its unusual lateral rivers. The virgin tall grass shuddered to be seen as the land's mind, the sky, streamed in the water, humming under them. From their deeper shade, the great conifers sprang into the 19th century, authorized by a purchase from the emperor, each ridge of forest as novel as Circe's island to the old song again. When he shot a bear, its cave sighed pregnant with the first death. When they ate bear, the moon looked an arched bow the other way. The river then a blind trickle, the stars to clusters appearing and appearing one by one, as far as he could see, and now, although they form the same eternal constellations, this night one of them streaking fell from creation to be seen by him. So that was...
I think you have time for another one, Mike. You're going to have a reading coming up, all right? Did you say?
Yeah, it's just been said. It's going to be at the First Church Congregationalist, Levin Garden Street.
In Cambridge.
In Cambridge. 21st of May.
At what time?
7 o'clock.
Okay. And you'll be reading with Bert Stern and who else?
Bert Stern and Irene Coronis, and all this has just been confirmed.
Okay.
So announcements will be set up soon. Yeah, and that'll be a great deal. I guess last I'll read...
Should be a short one because we don't have much time.
Okay.
Well,